Hello, today we will be talking about the storyline behind the opera Turandot. Now, the opera opens with a mandarin reading terms before a crowd outside the palace. The terms state that any prince seeking to marry Princess Turandot must answer 3 different riddles. If he fails one of them, he will be executed.
Turandot la pura sposa sarà, di chi di sangue regio spieghi 3 enigmi che la proporrà. Ma chi affronta il cimente vinto resta, barricalla score la superba testa.
Now, in the crowd is a servant girl named Liu and her 8th master Timur. And Timur is the king of Tartary, which was recently overthrown by the Chinese. In the crowd is also his son, Prince Klov. Now, Timur is knocked down, and Prince Klov rushes over to go help him up. And this is when he realizes that Timur is his long-lost father. He then looks at Liu and asks why she has stayed with Timur for so long even though she doesn't have to. Liu then replies and says that Prince Klov smiled upon her once and this is why she has stayed. As the full moon rises, the crowd outside the palace begs Turandot to spare the Prince of Persia's life. However, with one silent gesture, he is executed. Transfixed by her beauty, Prince Klov says that he will be the one who wins Princess Turandot over. He rushes over to go ring the gong and declare himself the new suitor, but Ping, Pang, and Pong, the advisors, rush over and strongly advise him not to, as it will only end in his death. He is not moved by this, and he reassures Liu that everything will be okay, and he rings the gong. This ends the first act. Now, the second act opens with Ping, Pang, and Pong sitting in their lovely homes, lamenting about how they only want to go back to their country homes by the lake and how they want Princess Turandot's bloody reign to end. Now they are called to the royal throne room for the riddles that Turandot gives Cloth. When Turandot enters the throne room, she is lamenting the fact about how her ancestor was kidnapped by another prince and killed, and this is why she has created the riddles so that no man can win her over. She then sits down and presents the first riddle to Cloth. He passes it, and she is not that moved. She then presents the second riddle, and he passes it. And she gets a little worried. She then presents the third riddle, and he passes it, and this is where she becomes frantic and begs the emperor not to let Cloth marry her, as she does not want to get married. He then presents her with his own riddle, and he says how if she can learn his name by the end of the next night, then he will kill himself so that she does not have to get married. This is the end of the second act. Now, the third act opens with Prince Klaf walking around the palace garden. He hears new terms being recited that nobody is allowed to sleep by order of Princess Turandot until Prince Klaf's name is found. Now, there's a mob forming outside the palace, and they beg Klaf to tell them his name, so that Turandot does not get mad at them. He refuses and said that he won't ever tell them his name.
Inutili preghiere, inutili minacce, che l'osa il mondo voglia Turandot.
They then bring in Timur and Liu in order to have them tell them his name. Liu then says that she is the only one that knows Klaf's name. However, she says that she will not ever say it. They then begin to torture her. However, she resists it. Turandot, who is also there, asks her how she has the power to resist their torture. And Liu says how it is love that keeps her together and keeps her from saying his name, and that one day Turandot will experience love too. She then grabs a dagger from a guard's belt and kills herself. A funeral procession then begins to form, and they bring Liu's body away. Turandot and Klaf are then left alone, and Klaf quickly kisses Turandot. This is the first time that she has ever felt emotions and love, and she begins to weep about what she has done. Klaf then reveals his name to Turandot, and Turandot then says that she knows his name and that his name is love. And this is the end of the entire opera. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to your Opera Lovers Crash Course. I'm Emma and I will be your host. Here we go. The opera we're looking at today is one of the most well-known and most frequently performed operas in the world, 16th according to Opera Base, Turandot by Puccini. As you've no doubt heard, Turandot follows the story of a Chinese princess and the riddles she sets to those who want to marry her. I'm here to tell you how that story and the one you know today came to be. So, way back in ancient times, storytelling was very popular. This particular story came from Nizami Ganyavi, a Persian poet whose famous collection of 7 stories called the Haf-Pekar, written in 1911, were passed around the world and eventually translated into the story told in the opera. The Haf-Pekar has 7 parts, one each to align with the 7 days of the week, the 7 colors, and the 7 known planets in the solar system. This story is Tuesday, Red, and Mars, and if that's not a little ominous, I don't know what is. The story is pretty much the same as the one known today, except that an added challenge is put to the suitors because not only do they have to answer 4 riddles now, but they also have to climb up a mountain with fatal obstacles put in place by the princess. The name Turandot actually comes from the Haf-Pekar as well, or at least a version of it. The original name of the princess was Turandot, which meant the daughter of Turan, Turan being the city in Persia where the princess was from. The name we know today, Turandot, actually comes from an adaptation of the story in the Haf-Pekar by French scholar Petit Delacroix in his book 1001 Days. He named his princess protagonist Turandot, meaning Turkish daughter in French. The first modern rendition of the story was written in 1762 by Carlo Gozzi, who translated it to German and made it more dramatic. It was later put on stage as a play in 1802. But enough of the history of the story, because I know you're all anxious to get to the actual opera itself, so here we go. As I said, Turandot was composed by Puccini in 1924. After meeting with librettist Giuseppe Adami and Renato Simoni and deciding they were too slow, Puccini began working ahead without them. A friend of Puccini's and former Italian diplomat to China gave Puccini a music box that played Chinese folk tunes, 3 of which he included in the opera. The most famous are Mo Li Hua, or Jasmine, which is used as the princess motif, and the national anthem used for the emperor. I'll let you listen to them now so you know what to expect when you go see the opera. By March of 24, Puccini had written up to the final duet, but being dissatisfied with the text, he had librettist Adami rewrite it 4 times. He continued composition on October 8th, but then was forced to stop because of cancer. Puccini was ultimately not able to finish composing, and the work was handed to Franco Alfano. Alfano received criticism at first for using his own style to finish the piece, and was forced to restart, replicating Puccini's style this time. He was not flying blind, however, because Puccini had left notes on the ending. Completed in 1926, the first performance of Turandot was conducted by the famous Arturo Toscanini. As a tribute and respect to Puccini, Toscanini stopped the performance at the part where Puccini had stopped composing. Here I'll show you the specific music to listen for, so you know exactly when Puccini died. Conveniently, this occurs at the end of a scene, so you don't have to listen very hard in the middle of an aria or something like that. As I said, this is where the first performance concluded. The second performance and every after that has been played all the way through. Interestingly enough, China banned the showing of Turandot for quite some time. They believed the protagonist of a bloodthirsty princess shows China in a negative light. They also didn't like the fact that the man who wins the challenges at the end is a foreigner, implying that China was beaten in wits by a foreign nation. The first performance in China wasn't until September of 1998, where it was called Turandot at the Forbidden City, and actual soldiers from the Chinese military were brought in to play extras in the cast. And that concludes our Opera Lovers Crash Course. Thanks for tuning in. If you're a lover of history, be sure to come back later today as we discuss the history of ancient China and the significance to Turandot. Good morning and welcome to your Ancient China Crash Course. I'm Emma and I will be your host. Here we go. Way back in the 1700s, China was under the control of the Qing dynasty. They conquered land from modern-day China, Mongolia, and parts of Russia, and the capital was located in Beijing. As far as the government was concerned, there wasn't really an established structure or legislature, though today we would call it an absolute monarchy. The country was ruled by an emperor appointed by the mandate of heaven. The social structure of ancient China was a little different from the typical social structures we'd usually think of. At the bottom were the slaves, of course, but then came the merchants and those who worked in trade. This is not what we typically think because businessmen are higher up today, but in ancient China, manual labor and handmade goods were more valuable and socially elevating than taking someone else's work for trade or profit. Next up were the artisans. Like I said, those who made their own goods were more highly respected than those who did not. Next up were the farmers. Again, this is not what we typically think, because in the modern Western world, after the Industrial Revolution, those who worked in manufacturing climbed the social ladder faster than those stuck in agriculture. In ancient China, however, farm labor was very highly valued, as it was one of the country's major economic support systems, and it kept the land fertile and healthy. Of course, the upper rungs of society were the emperor and his court of advisors and any nobility in the land. The interesting thing to note, however, is that women fit into this upper class during this time period. The culture valued the matriarchal contributions, which therefore led to women being praised and valued members of high society. This is reflected in the opera, as Princess Turandot is shown to be an authority figure and have control over the subjects of the land. She rules through respect and fear, showing the impact that women of the time period and culture could have. A Western princess would never have been able to have such control because women weren't valued as much in Western society. And that concludes our Ancient China Crash Course. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to come back later today to find out the shocking truth about Puccini.
Breaking news! Famous composer Giacomo Antonio Domenico Michele Secondo Maria Puccini had a crap ton of affairs. Welcome to your nightly scandal story. I'm your host, Craxy, and today we're talking about the famous composer and chainsmoker Puccini. As the sixth of 9 children, Puccini had a pretty normal 19th century life. His family had some musical influence in it, as his great-great-grandfather established the family as a musical dynasty by becoming the master of the chapel and organist in the area. His son and later Puccini's father did the same. Puccini himself started to go down the same path by going to the seminary in Lucca, and then switched to composition and work outside of the church by going to the Pacini School of Music, and later the Milan Conservatory, and studying under the famous Italian composer Giovanni Paisiello. In his early career, Puccini's most famous works include La Vili, an opera ballet, Edgar, a dramatic opera, and Manon Lescaut, another opera. Later in his career, more popular works known today include La Bohème, written in 1895, and Tosca, written in 1899. In 1903, Puccini was seriously injured in a car crash. After being pinned under the vehicle with a portion of the car pressing down on his chest, he emerged with a severe fracture in his right leg. He also had diabetes, which slowed his production of the famous opera, Madama Butterfly. In 1909, a scandal arose. Puccini's wife had accused him of having an affair with one of their maids. It was later proven that this accusation was false. The public humiliation, however, left the poor maid to commit suicide. After that, Puccini had another affair, this time with Blanche Lenvi. They exchanged love letters until 1911, where he switched to having an affair with Josephine von Stengel. Over several more years, Puccini had affairs with Maria Giurizza, Emmy Destin, Heraclea Darcli, and many others. Ironically, the most significant affair is the one that actually never happens. The maid that committed suicide is said to be Puccini's inspiration for the character Leo in his opera Turandot. Leo similarly commits suicide after being thought to know the name of Caliph, Turandot's suitor, because she is in love with him. After living as a chain smoker, it is unsurprising that Puccini died of throat cancer and was unable to finish his opera Turandot. Thank you for tuning in to your nightly scandal story. Hope you know a little more about the opera Turandot and the history surrounding it, and about the composer Puccini. Enjoy the opera!
So he didn't die?